You can't improve what you don't measure. And historically in healthcare, it's been very difficult for patients to navigate based on what they're going to get out of the process. So for example, when I had a couple of major surgeries, I made a selection on which surgeon to go to based on reference, sort of soft information, not hard information. I had no data about what that particular surgeon's outcomes were on the surgeries that he or she had performed. And so from a patient's perspective, measuring outcomes is about giving transparency onto what we're actually delivering. Historically, in healthcare, we've always focused on the service or the things that we're providing. That's not what the patient is actually looking to buy. They're actually looking to buy a better version of themselves, ultimately, which is the outcome itself. Look, patient-reported outcomes is a great place to start, but it's not where we finish. In order to use those data points effectively, to make them useful, they've got to be integrated with other sources of data, right? So we've got to figure out a way at scale to take patient-reported outcomes and then integrate them in a time-synchronized way with all of the other data that's available to us. Clinical data, wearable data, and so on, so that we have a sort of a full, holistic, synchronized view, so that you can start to correlate, okay, well, here's the intervention that I did, here's the change to the patient pathway or the workflows that I made, and this is how it manifested in terms of how the patient felt and how they assessed or perceived their own progress. So, on its own, great place to start, but we've really got to figure out a way to pull it into kind of this sort of unified picture of not only how we're providing care, but how patients are perceiving care and how they're perceiving their ultimate achievements and outcomes. The single biggest challenge for us is, getting the payers aligned in terms of the approach, getting them to understand the overall value proposition, the ROI, and the necessity to sometimes spend more up front to get more later. iChom's been around over a decade, and it's done an enormous amount of work already in structuring the conversation. There was a time when there were as many definitions of what constitutes value-based medicine as there were people talking about it. So in the early phase, I think iChom did a fantastic job in organizing the conversation, organizing the community, and implementing standard sets so that we are sort of singing from the same hymn sheet. Going forward, I think the role or the opportunity changes. And I think there's a real opportunity to spend a little bit more time and energy on advocacy. So engaging with stakeholder groups, whether it's the payers themselves, regulators and governments, but perhaps most importantly, employers who own risk and pay for that risk, in helping get them up to speed with why value-based approaches to the provision of care are important, why investment should be made in these things, and why employers specifically should demand this from the healthcare system that they're ultimately clients of. I'm excited to see the interactions and the teamwork between stakeholders. The ecosystem is evolving, and I think this year we're seeing a lot more payers and providers attending, and I'm really curious to see how those new members of the community interact with those of us who've been part of the community for a while. Conferences like this are an opportunity for people from all over the world to share ideas. It's a little bit of a break from the daily routine, and so hopefully it'll give everyone a little bit of space to think, to ideate, and hopefully generate some ideas that are actionable, so that we all walk away with something to do and then with some homework to finish before we come back and reconvene next year.